made a video a few months ago about classics that I would recommend for beginners, for people who are new to reading the classics. And I wanted to kind of expand on that and now start talking about classics that I would recommend based on things like your favorite modern books or movies or TV shows or genres. Now, this isn't like a for beginners kind of list. In fact, some of the things that I will mention probably are not the best place to start for beginners, like Shakespeare, for instance, but just kind of looking at if you like this modern story or this type of modern story, here are some classics that you might enjoy. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this video and hopefully others that follow. I've been doing kind of a Harry Potter theme this month, so I'm going to continue that and talk about classics that I would recommend for Harry Potter fans. The most obvious place to start would be that if you're a Harry Potter fan, you might like The Lord of the Rings. I have to say, I'm recommending this because it has a lot of similar archetypes and a similar kind of hero's journey storyline, but it's not a personal favorite. Some of the reasons that you might like it if you like Harry Potter, it does follow the hero's journey in a very similar way. Deathly Hallows and the Lord of the Rings series especially remind me of each other. It uses a lot of the same archetypes, so for instance, if you find yourself thinking that Frodo and Harry or Gandalf and Dumbledore are very similar characters, there is a reason for that. And also just because I personally find it to be worthwhile to go back and read older literature in genres that I enjoy. And if you like Harry Potter, fantasy is probably a genre that you like. Another recommendation that I have would be Dracula. Now, Dracula might seem like a little bit of an odd choice because it's very different, even though it is the fantasy genre very much like Harry Potter. It's more kind of dark fantasy, gothic horror, whereas Harry Potter is a kid's fantasy book. So I'm not recommending Dracula if you're a kid who likes Harry Potter, but if you're an adult who grew up with it. One of my favorite things about Dracula actually was that the characters are nobody in particular, nobody important. One of the main characters is a real estate agent, another one is a school teacher, a professor, a doctor, a cowboy. Like, yeah, those are cool and interesting professions in some cases, but they're not like, Hercules or something. And I think that that's something that Dracula has in common with the Harry Potter books. Yes, Harry is the chosen one of a prophecy, but he's also a pretty average 11 through 17-year-old boy. And the other characters, while they do have their skills and strengths and interesting qualities, a lot of them are very normal people, even kind of people that it would be easy to underestimate, like Neville and Luna, for instance. So if you liked watching a bunch of kind of normal underdog-type heroes team up against this terrible evil that nobody can face and that used to be human and isn't anymore and that everybody is terrified of, you might like Dracula. I also want to recommend you a few Shakespeare plays. If you like Harry Potter, I think that you might like Macbeth. Macbeth, in a very similar way to Harry Potter, deals with the question of prophecy and kind of self-fulfilling prophecies, free will versus destiny, and that kind of thing. After Harry becomes aware of the prophecy about him and Voldemort, he says to Dumbledore that, so does that mean that I don't have a choice? And Dumbledore says, well, if you'd never heard the prophecy, what would you think? And Harry says that he would still want to be the one to take Voldemort down, even if he'd never heard the prophecy. And it's then explained that the prophecy is significant because Voldemort thinks it's significant, but not necessarily because it has the power to control their destinies on its own. Dumbledore is very clear that most of the prophecies in the Department of Mysteries aren't ever fulfilled. Macbeth is very similar in that the witches make a prophecy to Macbeth that he will become king, and when his wife hears about this, she decides that the way to fulfill that prophecy is to take the throne by killing a lot of people. And it's not a pleasant situation at all. And it just makes you wonder, if Macbeth had never heard the prophecy, would he still have become king? Certainly not in the same manner. So if a prophecy is spoken but nobody hears it, does it still come true? If that kind of question appeals to you about the Harry Potter series, you might be interested in how it's explored in Macbeth as well. Another play that I think you might enjoy if you like Harry Potter is Hamlet. Particularly if you like the last couple of Harry Potter books and the darker, more serious aspects of Harry Potter. In Hamlet, the main character's father appears as a ghost and tells him that he was murdered by King Claudius and asks Hamlet to avenge him. And Hamlet spends the whole play trying to figure out if that's the right thing to do or not, and how to do it, and so on and so forth. In the Harry Potter books, there are plenty of characters who they end up doing whatever they're doing mostly because of their parents and because of something that happened to their parents. Harry being obviously the biggest example of this. Because Voldemort went after him as a baby and because of what happened to his parents, now he's an orphan and now Voldemort thinks that he is the chosen one, therefore he has to be the chosen one. The third one on my list is King Lear. And King Lear reminds me specifically of Sirius Black and his family. They're kind of a messed up, dysfunctional family in a similar way to the families in King Lear. I especially think that it's very interesting that in both cases you've got 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and lots of sibling betrayals and parents that don't make good decisions and things like that. Now, of course, there's a difference in that the 2 who end up kind of estranged from the family, in King Lear, they're the ones that are really there for their parents, and in Harry Potter, they're the ones that walk away and never look back because the families in Harry Potter are significantly worse than the ones in King Lear, or at least the parents are. But kind of that concept of complex, dysfunctional family relationships and parents and siblings that can't necessarily be trusted. If you liked that aspect of Sirius and his family, then you might like King Lear. And then finally the Tempest, partially because it involves an actual wizard, and so why not? But then also, more than that, I think that kind of the mixture of heavy, serious themes with a hopeful storyline and a happy ending is very similar to what you see in Harry Potter. In fact, I would say that The Tempest has that in common with a lot of modern storytelling, and therefore it probably would be a good choice if you like that aspect of modern storytelling in general. The Tempest has a lot in common with some of the comedies, like particularly A Midsummer Night's Dream, but then it also has a lot in common with Romeo and Juliet, with the feuding families and the forbidden lovers and everything. It takes serious questions about betrayal and reconciliation, and it puts them alongside lighthearted comic moments, and it gives everything, it ties everything up in a nice little bow and gives it a happy ending. So if one of the things that you liked about the Harry Potter books is that they were not afraid to tackle difficult subject matter, but usually ended happily, you might like The Tempest. If you like Harry Potter, you also might like Les Miserables. Now, I will warn you, it's a really long book. So, I don't recommend it for someone who is new to the classics, just getting into reading them, or really, if you don't really feel motivated to read Les Mis, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but I do think that it has some things in common with the Harry Potter books that, if you like them, you might like this. A couple of the characters really remind me of each other. For instance, young Cosette and Harry, particularly Harry when he was still with the Dursleys before he turned 11. They both are taken in by this family that really doesn't care a lot about them, that spoils their own child or children while very much neglecting Harry and Cosette. They're made to live in the cupboard under the stairs, and then one day this mysterious stranger shows up and whisks them away to a much better life. So it's kind of a classic Cinderella story, really, but I think there are some interesting parallels there. The character of Jean Valjean and Sirius Black also remind me a whole lot of each other. Obviously, the stories are a little bit different from each other, and that Sirius is an innocent man who is wrongly accused of a very serious crime, whereas Jean Valjean is actually guilty, but his crime was stealing bread to feed his sister's starving family, so 19 years in prison and then being on the run for the rest of his life is pretty extreme. They're very different in terms of personality as well, but just the situations that they are in and the way that the novels explore the question of guilt, innocence, justice, and injustice, and when does the punishment outweigh the crime, when is the justice system not really fair, and things like that. I think that there are some similarities there, so if you liked that aspect of Harry Potter, you might like Les Miserables. The other thing that I think they both address on a pretty deep level is the question of what would you be willing to fight for, and more specifically, what would you be willing to die for? There are characters in Les Mis that are very willing to lay down their lives for the chance of a better future, for freedom and democracy and all that good stuff. And there are characters in Harry Potter that are very willing to lay down their lives for, again, the chance of a better future and for the possibility that they might be able to stop Voldemort. So if you liked that aspect of Harry Potter that makes you seriously consider what is worth risking your life for, you might like Les Mis. I do have to reiterate though, not only is the book very long, but if you read the unabridged version, the author spends a lot of time on pointless digressions that have nothing to do with the story, like the Battle of Waterloo or the sewers of Paris. So just be prepared for that in advance. And then finally, if you like Harry Potter, you might be interested in old-fashioned mysteries of the early to mid-20th century. I'm thinking ones like Agatha Christie's, for instance. Most of the Harry Potter books do have some kind of a central mystery to them. They're not all murder mysteries, although I would say that Chamber of Secrets is kind of a PG-rated murder mystery where nobody actually dies. But regardless, most of them do have some core question and a twist at the end that would surprise you. Who's trying to steal the Sorcerer's Stone? Who opened the Chamber of Secrets? Who put Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire? And so on and so forth. So if you liked trying to figure out what was going on, trying to figure out the answer to that question, then being shocked by what it turned out to be, and then going back to read it again and seeing all the clues that you had missed the first time around, you might really like Agatha Christie-style old-fashioned mysteries. So those are my recommendations. If you're a Harry Potter fan and there are classics that you like that you would want to recommend to other people who like Harry Potter, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. If you liked this and you'd like to see more, feel free to subscribe. I post new videos on Mondays and Thursdays, and I'll be posting several more of these classics recommendations based on favorite modern books, movies, TV shows, genres, and so on in the future.